Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. If you saw my intro video, then welcome back. But in any case, thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'll be talking about the serial killer Christopher Wilder. You may have known him as the Beauty Queen Killer, which will make a little bit more sense once we get more into the video and his. Christopher Wilder is a ruthless serial killer who just did horrible things to his victims, and all of his victims were women, and he had multiple victims. So if that's not something that you're very into, then maybe just go watch a different video of mine. Christopher Bernard Wilder was born on March 13th, 1945 in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. His father was an American naval officer from Alabama, and his mother, who is a native Australian, actually met his father in Australia when his ship that he was stationed on was getting repaired there. Right when Wilder entered this world, he was faced with some near life and death situations. While he was being born, he almost died, and just when he was 2 years old, he almost drowned in a swimming pool. Although this has never been proven, and it would seem strange given that in Wilder's later life, he lived in close proximity to water and the ocean. So if you almost drowned, wouldn't you be scared of the water? Anyways, by 1963, Wilder seemed to have a seemingly good life in Australia. He was young, handsome, and he was the only one out of his friends that actually had a car. This, however, was the same year that Christopher Wilder would tarnish his family's name. Wilder pleads guilty to the rape of a 13-year-old girl, which he first describes as a gang rape. According to the book The Snapshot Killer by Duncan McNab, which goes in great detail about Christopher Wilder's life and his crimes, this was an act that Wilder did all on his own, and he was just accompanied by some friends. The men that were with Christopher Wilder stated that they had no idea that he was going to rape this young girl, and if they had known, they wouldn't have gone with him at all. Although they claimed to not partake in any unwanted advances to this young girl, they and Christopher Wilder were all arrested for this act. Wilder was put on a 1-year probation with mandatory counseling, and it's said that during this point he also received electroshock therapy, but that's also something that's questionable because the other men claim to not have received this kind of therapy. Then, in 1968, Wilder gets married, and just 1 week after marriage, his wife leaves him. So after this failed marriage, Christopher Wilder decides to go to the United States, and he ends up in Boynton Beach, Florida, which is just north of Miami and just south of West Palm Beach, which is pretty popular to politicians and retirees. When he got there, he was successful in real estate, and this is also the time when he gained interest into photography. From 1971 to 1975, Christopher Wilder faced multiple charges related to sexual misconduct. And eventually he ends up raping a young woman after he lured her into his truck by convincing her to let him photograph her for a modeling contract. This later ends up being his favorite way to lure his victims in during his cross-country crimes. On April 13th, 1980, Wilder attacked and tried to abduct 17-year-old Carla Hendry in Beverly, Massachusetts, but she was luckily able to get away. In 1982, Wilder went back to Australia to visit his parents, but when he was there, he was actually charged with sexual offenses against two 15-year-old girls who he had forced to pose nude for him. His parents were able to post his $350,000 bail, and Wilder was allowed to go back to the States while he awaited his trial, which would never come. As if all of the things that he's already done were not enough, in the early half of 1984, Christopher Wilder would begin his ruthless cross-country 6-week killing spree. Just so you can understand the timeline, I'll be going in the order of the murders. The first murder that we can connect Wilder to is that of Rosario Gonzales, who was last seen on February 26, 1984 from the Miami Grand Prix, where she was working as a sport model. Then on March 5th, Miss Florida finalist, and who also happens to be Wilder's ex-girlfriend, Elizabeth Kenyon, goes missing as well. Neither women have ever been found. Elizabeth Kenyon's family hired a private investigator, and thanks to his efforts, after the police consulted with him, they were able to link Wilder to both women. On March 18th, Wilder led Teresa Waite Ferguson, who was 21 at the time, away from the Merritt Square Mall in Merritt Island, Florida. He kills her and dumps her body at Canaveral Groves, where she was discovered 5 days later on March 23rd. His next victim was 19-year-old college student Linda Grover from Florida State University. He first approached Linda on March 20th at the Governor Square Mall, but she declined his offer to photograph her for a modeling agency. But Wilder follows Linda, and he ends up abducting her and transporting her to Bainbridge, Georgia, where he ends up getting a room at the Glen Oaks Motel, and he does awful, foul things to Linda here. He raped her. He would use super glue on her eyes and then use a blow dryer to dry them. He also put copper wires around her feet and passed electric currents through them. He was just so cruel. He also would just beat the crap out of her if she tried to escape. But at one point, she did get loose of her restraints and run into the bathroom, where she was able to lock herself in there and bang on the walls just to get the neighbors' attention. And this spooked Wilder, so he ended up grabbing all of his things and all of Linda's stuff and just fled the scene. The next day, on March 21st, Wilder approaches Terry Walden, who also declines his offer to photograph her for a modeling contract. But just 2 days later, on March 23rd, Terry disappears. Wilder ends up putting his stolen license plates on her Mercury Cougar and dumps her body in a canal, where she's later discovered on March 26th. That same day, the body of 21-year-old Susan Logan was discovered in Oklahoma City. Susan had disappeared the day before, and it's said that she was raped and tortured before being stabbed to death. Then, on March 29th, Wilder took 18-year-old Cheryl Bonaventura captive. They were actually seen at a diner in Silverton, and they told the waitstaff that they were headed towards Las Vegas. Bonaventura was shot and stabbed to death around March 31st in Utah, but her body wasn't found until May 3rd. Wilder also killed 17-year-old aspiring model Michelle Horseman. Michelle went missing on April 1st from a 17 magazine cover competition, which was taking place at the Meadows Mall in Las Vegas. A photo was actually taken at this competition, and you can clearly see Wilder staring at Michelle. It's pretty creepy and very eerie. Michelle's remains were later discovered near a Southern California roadside rest stop on May 11th, but needed to be identified by dental records. Then, while Wilder was in the Torrance, California area, he photographs 16-year-old Tina Marie Rosicki, and I'm sure you've guessed it as well, he abducts Tina too. He ends up driving her to El Centro, where he repeatedly rapes her. But Wilder thinks differently of Tina. He believes that he can use Tina to help him lure in other victims easier. So he actually keeps Tina alive. At this point, Wilder and Tina start heading east, and when they're in the Maryville, Indiana area, Tina helps Wilder abduct 16-year-old Dawnette Walt from South Lake Mall. Wilder ends up raping Dawnette while Tina is driving towards New York. Eventually, Wilder takes Dawnette into the woods, where he attempted to suffocate her before stabbing her twice and leaving her to die. But Wilder has no idea how strong Dawnette is, and her will to survive just automatically kicks in. Dawnette took a pair of jeans and tied them around herself, and a truck driver actually found her and drove her to the Soldiers and Sailors Hospital in Penang. Dawnette needed life-saving surgery, so Dr. John F. Flynn performed it, and Dawnette was able to survive this whole ordeal. She was even able to inform police that Wilder was headed towards Canada. Wilder's last victim would end up being 33-year-old Beth Dodge. She was abducted at the Eastview Mall parking lot in Victor, New York. He forced her into his car, and after a short ride, Wilder shoots her and dumps her body. Then he and Tina drive to Logan Airport in Boston, where Wilder buys Tina a plane ticket back to California. And he actually ends up giving her money for her travels as well. Just like that, she's free. On April 13th, Wilder ends up stopping at a service station in Colebrook, New Hampshire, where 2 New Hampshire troopers are actually there and they recognize him. Leo Jellison and Wayne Forcher are the 2 New Hampshire troopers that recognize Wilder and begin to approach him. And when they do, Wilder goes back to his car to get his gun. 2 shots are fired. The first shot goes through Wilder's back and into Trooper Jellison. The second shot went into Wilder's chest. Wilder was killed, and though Trooper Jellison was seriously injured, he was able to fully recover and get back to active duty. Christopher Wilder was cremated in Florida, and it's said that he left behind a personal estate of worth around $7 million. In June of 1986, a court-appointed arbitrator, which is someone who is officially appointed to settle a dispute, ruled that the after-tax balance should be distributed evenly amongst the victims' families. So that completes this video. I've linked all of the resources I've used in preparation for this video. So if you would like to look into more about Christopher Wilder, go ahead and check those out. He is also a person of interest in many other cases, and it's just hard to link him to certain things, but he is theorized to have killed a lot more people. So there's definitely a lot more that you can learn about Christopher Wilder. If you know of anything that I maybe left out in this video that you think is important or interesting, I'd love to see it in the comments below. If you have any case suggestions or video suggestions, please also add those in the comments below. I would love to read them. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have not already, please subscribe to my channel. I would love to grow my family. With all of that being said, thank you all so much. Until next time, stay smart, stay sharp.